Hey guys! Tonight we slip into sandals and shuffle through time, to the land of temples, incense, and razors. You find yourself on the sandy floor of a shadowed shrine, the scent of frankincense still clinging to the pillars like perfume to a scarf. The early morning sun casts long gold beams across a smooth stone basin, where water sits still as a priest's breath. Nearby, resting on a polished reed mat, lies a delicate bronze razor, already slightly warm from the rising heat. This isn't your average morning shave. You're about to prepare for divine service in one of the most fastidious roles in all of history, an ancient Egyptian priest. And yes, you're going to need to lose every single hair on your body, including your brows. No, you don't get to skip your knees, or pretend your arms are fine as they are, because here, purity isn't a vibe, it's law. Priests in ancient Egypt weren't just spiritual guides, they were walking, whispering extensions of the gods themselves. That meant cleanliness had to be as flawless as the inscriptions on a temple wall. And hair? Hair was dirty. Hair trapped sweat, clung to lice, and worst of all, symbolized the animal nature within. And you, my friend, are aiming for the divine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your duties before dawn, when the air still feels vaguely forgiving and the temple stones haven't yet radiated the full sting of midday sun. There's no sleeping in, no stretching lazily under linen sheets. Instead, you're already moving, feet bare, stepping silently to the purification chamber. Every part of you is expected to be clean, not just washed, but scrubbed, anointed, and gleaming. The priests shave not once, not twice, but every other day at minimum. Some accounts even claim multiple times daily. They used blades made from sharpened flint or bronze, sometimes obsidian, meticulously honed to remove the slightest whisper of fuzz. Eyebrows? Gone. Scalp? Smooth. Chest? You'd better hope you had no chest hair to begin with. It's not just hygiene, though it helped. Lice were rampant in the ancient world, and being hairless reduced the risk. It's about purity. To step into a temple, to handle offerings, to speak the names of gods, you had to be ritually clean. Any trace of bodily filth, even a stray hair or crumb under a fingernail, was seen as a disruption to divine harmony. You run a cloth soaked in cool lotus water over your limbs, then start the meticulous process. You don't cut yourself, heavens no. One nick, and you're unfit for duty. Some scholars say they had assistants, trained specifically in ritual shaving. Imagine that. Someone whose job was to ensure not a single rogue nostril hair survived the sunrise. But you're not alone. Around you, other priests move in slow, deliberate silence. You glimpse the outline of a fellow servant behind a screen, dabbing his chin with a reed swab. Another sprinkles natron salt over his arms, a natural antiseptic, probably stinging like betrayal. And here comes your first fringe fact of the night. Priests didn't shave because they were vain or afraid of tan lines. They shaved because body hair was associated with death and decomposition. The gods were imagined as eternally youthful and perfect beings did not have stubble. Even more curious, statues of gods never show body hair. Not a single curly lock. Historians still argue whether this was a literal ideal or simply artistic convention. Either way, if you wanted to serve Ra, you had to resemble Ra, or at least not look like you wandered out of a tavern in Memphis. The city, not the Elvis one. You carefully tilt your head and scrape along the jawline, a thin sheen of oil making the bronze glide more easily. The blade is colder than expected, but the air warms it fast. A shallow bowl beside you collects the runoff, a mixture of hair, water, and whatever tiny flakes of natron didn't cling to your skin. Later, it'll be dumped far away from the sacred zone. Can't risk impurity backflow. And here comes a little moment to reflect. Isn't it strange how being close to the gods meant letting go of the things that made you, well, you? Your scent, your voice, your body hair, all erased, as if you had to become a blank page for the divine to write upon. Now, let's zoom out. Egyptian temples weren't just places of worship, they were microcosms of the universe. Every stone aligned with celestial bodies. Every wall spoke in hieroglyphs to the heavens. And inside this cosmic machine, priests were the gears. Silent, necessary, replaceable. You finish your shave and pat your face with a soft linen cloth, scented faintly with myrrh. The robe you wear afterward is simple, white, and immaculately folded. No jewelry, no color. You're not here to impress. You're here to disappear into function. Oh, and here's your quirky tidbit. Some priests were so thorough they even shaved their eyebrows off daily. According to certain scrolls, even the death of a sacred cat demanded a mourning period, but that mourning was shown by growing out your eyebrows. So, ironically, having fuzzy brows was a sign of grief. Otherwise, you kept him bald as a limestone statue. The temple's main sanctuary still waits. Soon, you'll light incense, recite invocations, and present bread shaped like miniature DJ'd pillars. But first, one final inspection by the head priest, a hawk-eyed elder who can spot a rogue armpit hair like a crocodile spots a ripple on the Nile. You pass, just barely. And so, freshly shaved and faintly glowing with oil, you pad barefoot down the cool hallway. Your steps echo against pillars carved with lotus blossoms and dancing gods. The day has only just begun. And you're already smooth as a god, silent as a shadow, and ready to serve. You step lightly through the colonnaded walkway, morning sun beginning to glint off polished alabaster tiles beneath your feet. Your linen robe rustles softly, just one layer tonight, since the air's already warming. The temple is waking around you in hushed rhythms. In the courtyard, an acolyte sprinkles rosewater across the stones. Someone rings a bronze bell in a rhythm meant to coax the divine into listening. And you, freshly shaved and anointed, are heading to your next task, the sacred preparation ritual. But before you so much as touch a loaf of consecrated bread, you must purify again. Yes, even though you just scrubbed your entire body like a nervous wedding guest. Because being clean in the temple doesn't mean a one-time rinse. It means maintaining a constant state of ritual readiness, as if the gods might walk in unannounced and spot a smudge on your elbow. So you enter the purification chamber once more. It's a serene, echoey room, open to the sky but surrounded by tall walls. Palm trees sway in the courtyard beyond, their fronds casting lace-like shadows over the stone. And there, in the center, is a shallow limestone basin. You kneel beside it, scoop cool water over your face, over your arms, behind your ears. It drips quietly, no splashes. You're practiced now, quietly meticulous. Priests repeated these ablutions as many as 5 times a day. Some sources even hint at hourly washes during festivals or intense rituals. It wasn't about visible filth, it was about invisible chaos. You see, the world outside the temple was full of dust, decay, desire, and disorder. But inside, here was Ma'ah, the divine balance of order, harmony, and peace. Hair, sweat, smells, all signs of entropy, of life's wildness. You had to erase them before touching the sacred. You dry your hands on a white cloth and catch your reflection in the water. The absence of hair does something strange to your face. It's cleaner, yes, but also more anonymous. You look like everyone and no one, like a blank mask waiting to be animated by duty. You walk from the chamber into the linen room, where rows of freshly washed robes hang in orderly silence. Some are faintly perfumed with blue lotus. Others carry the subtle crispness of natron. You choose one without adornment, no color, no fringe, no stitch out of place. It's not meant to express your personality. It's meant to erase it. And here's a moment that might amuse you. Some historians argue whether priests wore undergarments. Certain wall paintings suggest, nope. Others imply maybe a short kilt beneath the robe. The truth? Still debated. And unless someone invents time travel underwear photography, we may never know. But what we do know is this: linen was crucial. No wool, ever. Wool came from animals, and animals were chaotic, impure, noisy. Linen, made from the flax plant, was clean, light, and didn't cling. Plus, it could be bleached to that blinding white so beloved by the temple staff, almost a uniform of light. You finish dressing and step into the incense room. A waft of kaifi, sweet and spicy, made from honey, raisins, myrrh, and wine, curls through the air. You inhale deeply, letting the scent settle into your senses. Even smell, here, is curated, controlled. You might wonder, didn't this get tiring? Shaving, scrubbing, reshaving, constant inspections? In truth, probably yes. But being a priest wasn't about comfort. It was about containment. To the ancient Egyptian mind, cleanliness wasn't next to godliness, it was godliness. The absence of hair, of sweat, of earthy scent, made the body a better conduit for the sacred. In fact, There's a papyrus fragment that describes the priestly morning in painstaking detail. Wake, bathe, shave, oil, dress, purify, repeat. It reads almost like a military checklist. Forget to do any of these things? Disqualified from ceremony. Even a stub of forgotten stubble could bar you from service that day. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Temple workers weren't allowed to sweat in the sanctuary. Not a drop, which is a bit of a problem in Egypt. So, ceremonies were often timed for early mornings or cooler evenings, and some priests even trained themselves to suppress perspiration through breathing techniques. Whether this actually worked or just made them faint occasionally, well, historians still argue that part. But back to you. You've finished your second round of ablutions. You've wrapped your smooth limbs in fresh linen. You've anointed your skin with a dab of scented oil, carefully, never too much, lest it look vain. And now, you stand ready for one of the most intimate duties of the day: food preparation for the gods. In the sacred kitchen, you slice soft bread shaped like tiny onks. You drizzle honey onto it, place it carefully in a carved wooden tray. Every movement is deliberate, every gesture quiet. And if your hands tremble, that's all right. Even the gods understand nerves. As the tray is lifted, passed through veils of incense smoke, you take one final glance at your reflection in the polished copper. No hair, no blemish, just a face that could belong to any priest from any dynasty across time. You wonder, did they feel this same tired ache behind the eyes? The same quiet pride? The same awareness that, though forgotten by history, they were once part of something holy? Your feet shift slightly on the stone. A small breeze drifts in from a high window. And for just a second, the whole temple feels like it's holding its breath. Just you, the sacred air, and the lingering scent of kaifi. Your feet tread softly along the papyrus-lined corridor as you exit the incense room. The offering has been made. The gods are fed. You are still smooth, still composed, and still faintly glowing with oil. But before the morning ends, there's one last duty: inspection. Not of the temple, of your face, specifically those fuzzy little caterpillars once known as eyebrows. Now, it might sound like a minor detail. Eyebrows. Who cares? They're not exactly sacred geometry. But here in ancient Egypt, your brows were very much under divine scrutiny. So don't get too attached to them. You enter the chamber of reflection. Part mirror room, part grooming station, part self-doubt arena. On the wall hangs a polished bronze disc, its surface slightly warped but still reflective enough to catch every stray shadow above your eyes. You lean in. There they are, or rather, they aren't. Because just yesterday, you shaved them off again. But still, you inspect. Any hint of regrowth? A dark speck beneath the skin? A rogue follicle whispering rebellion? Can't have that. Not in this house of purity. So, you reach for your tiny copper razor and gently drag it across the brow ridge. No blood, no bumps, just a quiet scrape and a flick of dust. It's meditative, almost, and weirdly satisfying, the act of erasure, of unbecoming. In Egyptian cosmology, chaos was the ultimate threat, and hair, especially unruly facial hair, was like a tiny riot on your face. Here's where things get fun. Priests didn't just shave their brows for hygiene. They did it because of one very particular cultural moment. If a sacred cat died, the family, and sometimes temple priests, would demonstrate mourning by growing their eyebrows out. Yes, you heard that right. Smooth brows were the default. Bushy ones meant grief. Imagine showing up at temple with visible brows and being met with gasps and sympathetic murmurs. Oh no, did someone's cat pass away? It gets better. There's at least one tomb painting that seems to show a priest carefully plucking his eyebrows with tweezers made of ivory. The same set of images shows jars of unguents, polished stones for skin smoothing, and even what might be a pumice tablet. In short, these guys had a routine. Ancient Egyptian skincare influencers? Maybe not quite, but close. Still, historians argue over whether this was universal. Some priests were depicted with facial features that look, let's say, suggestively shaded. Were those remnants of brows? Stylized shadows? Or just artistic flourish? No one agrees. Even Egyptologists squinting at high-res photographs from tomb walls can't decide. Brow or blemish. The mystery endures. As for you, in this moment, you opt for total smoothness. You dab a bit of natron paste across the brow bone, both as a cleanser and a mild exfoliant. It smells faintly like baking soda mixed with seawater. You let it sit for a beat, then rinse with cold water from a palm leaf bowl. Refreshing, bracing, slightly numbing. You pat dry with the hem of your robe. Now, a moment of silence. You look up into your own gaze. With no brows to define your expression, your face looks strange. Calm, alien, like a statue that hasn't yet been named. And here comes a curious thought. Do you feel more sacred? Or just more blank? Because in becoming a servant of the gods, you've slowly peeled away your outer markers of identity. Hair, scent, fashion, voice, ego. All of it removed, simplified, dissolved. You are not yourself. You are a vessel, a function, a quiet conduit for the divine. Still, one can't help but wonder, did some priests secretly miss their brows? Did they ever stare longingly at villagers with thick, unruly face fuzz and sigh, one day, when I retire? You smirk at the thought, which feels almost heretical. But now, your time in the chamber is done. You bow gently to the polished mirror. Yes, that's part of the ritual, too. And step back into the corridor. The temple is quieter now. Morning duties are winding down. The sun is higher in the sky, casting a hot white sheen across the courtyard. You take shelter in the shadow of a massive column carved with lotus blossoms and sacred falcons. And here's your offbeat trivia for the night: eyebrow wigs. Yes, there's some evidence, admittedly sparse, that extremely elite Egyptians may have worn artificial eyebrows made from human hair or animal fibers, glued delicately above the eye. Were priests allowed to wear these during ceremonies? Probably not, but outside temple walls, when not on duty. Possibly, maybe even fashionably. The idea of priests swapping eyebrow wigs in secret has probably not been explored enough in academic circles. You sit for a moment in the shade, breathing slowly. The stone beneath you is warm, not hot. The scent of sandalwood lingers in the air. A small fly buzzes past, but you swat it away with the ease of a man too clean to attract insects. Your duties will resume soon, but for now, this is a rare pause. A moment of reflection, of remembering that beneath all the ritual and smoothness and silence, you're still someone. A person, a servant of the divine, sure, but also, just someone with a face, even if that face is missing its brows. The bell rings again. Time to rise. And maybe, just maybe, you allow yourself one guilty thought. You sort of miss your eyebrows. The courtyard hums with heat now, its flagstones baking under the noonday sun. You move quickly, staying close to the shadows of the portico, gliding past stone columns shaped like papyrus stems. The temple isn't bustling, it never bustles, but it breathes with purpose. One priest chants softly by the sanctuary door. Another carries a polished jar of wine, held steady with both hands, as if transporting liquid sunlight. But you're headed somewhere quieter, somewhere wetter. The temple baths. Not the kind with marble columns and lounging philosophers. No, these are austere, functional, and absolutely essential. Carved from limestone, lined with steps, and always cold. You descend into the sacred pool with the slow grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times, and still flinches every time the water hits their ribs. You're not alone. Another priest slips silently into the opposite corner, nodding faintly in acknowledgement, but saying nothing. That's the way here. Purification isn't a social hour. It's a moment to reset, to scrub away the creeping clutter of the day. You dip a reed ladle into the water and pour it over your scalp. Well, where your scalp would be, if you had hair. The sensation is immediate. Cold, clean, clarifying. You rub with a coarse cloth dipped in natron and oil, careful not to overdo it. The last thing you need is raw skin before an evening ritual. But the natron's essential. It pulls impurities from the skin, neutralizes odors, and gives everything that faint mineral crispness that only a civilization this obsessed with afterlife hygiene could perfect. Now here's your mainstream fact. Priests were required to bathe in these pools as many as 4 or 5 times a day. Not just once in the morning, or before major rites, every few hours. You could say the gods had very low tolerance for body odor. Or maybe high standards for spiritual clarity. Either way, you're in for a lot of splashing. And for good reason. These weren't just baths, they were barriers. Rituals involving gods couldn't be contaminated by anything human. Not sweat, not hair, not a crumb of leftover barley. If the line between mortal and divine was thin, then water was the membrane that protected both. You scrub gently along your arms. The water laps softly. The silence stretches. Occasionally, a splash echoes from the far side of the pool, as someone else rinses under their arms. You glance at your forearms, still smooth. But later, after evening service, you'll need to check again. And now your quirky tidbit. The ancient Egyptians believed that the underworld had its own temple baths. Not just rivers like the Greek Styx, but full-blown ceremonial pools where the dead would purify themselves before entering the afterlife halls. Some funerary texts even describe the deceased being washed by helper gods with names like "He who purifies" and "She who removes stink." Rough translation, but you get the point. So, when you bathe here, you're not just doing it for temple etiquette. You're rehearsing your own death. In the most respectful, squeaky clean way. You float for a moment. Not fully lying back, priests don't lounge. But enough to feel the water take some weight. The stone is cool against your back. Your breath slows. The echoes of chanting fade. All you hear is the quiet plinking of droplets falling from stone ledges. It almost lulls you into sleep. Almost. But then you remember. The bell will ring soon. You rise from the pool and dry off with a fine linen cloth, one of the many stacked neatly on the stone shelf nearby. No towels here, just long, thin strips of fabric that feel slightly scratchy but clean. Always clean. And now comes the fun part, re-oiling. Because while you may be hairless, you're not supposed to be raw. Your skin must gleam like the surface of a polished scarab. The oil is thick and warm from the sun, and you rub it in methodically. Arms, chest, back, each motion practiced, slow. You don't rush. Rushing would wrinkle your robe and your reputation. The oil smells faintly of almonds and blue lotus, with a whisper of cinnamon. The recipe varies depending on the season, but the intention remains. To make your skin not only pure, but pleasant. A smooth, sweet-smelling vessel for sacred energy. Now, let's talk temple gossip. Yes, even here. There's always quiet judgment about who applies too much oil, or whose arms are still a bit fuzzy. One priest once got assigned latrine duties for a week because his shin hair caught the sunlight during a midday rite. The lesson? Never let your grooming slip. The gods may forgive, but the head priest will not. As you finish drying, a young acolyte steps into the chamber and bows. He doesn't speak, but the meaning is clear. Time to prepare the sanctum. You nod, gather your robe, and begin redressing. Each fold is deliberate, each sash tied with the precision of a man who knows that one sloppy corner could mean being barred from the altar. You glance once more at the pool as you leave. The surface has settled again, smooth and still. Like your skin, like your expression, like the rhythm of temple life. And here's your debate of the day. Some scholars insist these constant ablutions were more about status than spirituality. That priests liked the exclusivity, the labor, the sense of elevation from the sweaty masses outside temple walls. Others argue, passionately, that this was true belief. That purification was as vital as breath. You're not sure. All you know is that it's time to return to the inner halls. Your skin still tingles from the cool water. Your feet are bare and clean. And the gods are waiting. Step quietly now. You glide through the darkened corridor like a whisper stitched into linen, your bare feet nearly silent on the sandstone floor. The afternoon sun hangs low outside now, throwing long shafts of amber through high clerestory windows, slicing golden bars across your path. The air is thick with incense, myrrh this time, darker, denser. It clings to the walls like smoke to memory. You're heading toward one of the more peculiar spaces in the temple complex, a chamber dedicated not to offerings, nor to chants, but to protection, from things unseen. From filth, certainly, from impurity, but also from things less literal. You step into the room of cleansing icons, and there on the stone shelf, resting beside a carved ibis statue, is a small bowl. Its contents? A gritty gray paste, its scent unmistakable. Yes, that's crocodile dung. Don't wince too hard. You're about to rub some of it on your skin. Because in this civilization of sacred smoothness, shaving was only the beginning. Once the blade had done its work, once the skin was bared and rinsed and oiled, there remained another crucial step: protection from evil spirits, disease, and rash. And for that, ancient Egyptians turned to the bizarre, the pungent, and the oddly effective. That gray paste, crocodile dung mixed with honey and natron, was believed to form a kind of spiritual barrier, shielding you from malevolent forces. Its strong scent and, let's be honest, probably its aggressive ick factor, was thought to deter wandering demons. You dab a bit on your arms and neck. It smells earthy. Let's go with that. Now here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians regularly used dung, yes, dung, as part of medicinal and ritual treatments. Crocodile dung was also used as a contraceptive, though whether it worked is unlikely, while donkey dung was applied to wounds. To us, it sounds like a recipe for infection. To them, it was layered with symbolic meaning: the strength of the beast, the grounding of earth, the purification by fermentation. And yes, a dash of, well, it hasn't killed anyone yet. You finish applying the paste and let it dry. It hardens slightly, tightening the skin. You look ridiculous, but also protected. You're not alone in this odd exfoliation. The walls here are lined with tools of purification: blunt razors, ivory tweezers, pumice stones, and smoothed pots of various pastes. There's even a shallow tray filled with white sand, which priests used like a body scrub. No bath salts here. Just the ancient equivalent of a spa day designed by a beetle god. And here's your quirky tidbit. One surviving instruction tablet reads almost like a recipe. Grind the natron, add oil of cedar, rub it upon the scalp. Then take the dung of the crocodile and apply in a ring upon the navel. No one's quite sure why the navel, specifically. Maybe demons have a thing for belly buttons. You smile to yourself as you imagine a circle of priests all patting their navels solemnly. Crocodile paste rings glowing faintly in the torchlight. Somewhere in the underworld, a demon recoils in confusion. You shift to the next task. A pumice stone, smoothed from centuries of use, sits in a copper bowl. You lift it, dip it into cool water, and begin gently rubbing your legs. Not to remove hair. You've already shaved today, but to polish, to keep the skin supple, to remove dead cells. Again, it's not vanity. It's ritual. There's a belief that the cleaner your body, the more clearly the gods can see you. A spiritual version of good lighting. And if you're thinking this all sounds exhausting, you're right. The level of bodily maintenance required of temple priests was astonishing, especially when you remember that these rituals happened multiple times a day. You had to be present, composed, hairless, and luminous all the time. No pressure. Yet you do it, not because you're vain, not even because the high priest might inspect your ankles later. You do it because the rituals shape your day. They anchor you. In a world filled with dust storms, wild hippos, and unpredictable Nile floods, the repetition of shaving and scrubbing and oiling becomes a kind of armor. A way to say, I belong to the order. I uphold Ma'ah, even if I smell like the business end of a crocodile. And now for the ongoing debate. Historians still argue whether these practices were deeply spiritual or just institutional control. Was this about pleasing the gods? Or ensuring obedience through relentless cleanliness? Some say it was about maintaining a visible class distinction. We are clean, therefore we are better. Others insist it was sincere. Cleanliness as closeness to eternity. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the cracks between stone tiles. Maybe a little of both. You rinse your arms again, this time just water, letting the last bits of paste swirl down a narrow drain carved with the shape of a coiled cobra. You dry off, re-oil lightly, and replace your linen robe, creased now in that perfect, angular way only temple folders seem able to achieve. You pause before leaving. The air smells faintly of cedar and, well, crocodile. But also something else. Something clean, ancient, and oddly reassuring. Like the scent of order itself. And just as you're about to step back into the hallway, you catch sight of your reflection again. This time in a copper basin half filled with water. Smooth scalp, browless gaze, skin like moonlit stone. You look sacred, tired but sacred. One last breath. And on you go. The corridor narrows ahead, ceiling pressing lower, as you move from the outer chambers back toward the heart of the temple. You know this path by feel now. The scuffed edge of the sixth paving stone, the faint scent of lotus where the high priest spilled oil last week. The halls here are dim, with only flickering oil lamps to guide your way, their flames dancing against murals of divine creatures, falcons, lions, sun discs cradled in cobras' coils. You're walking with purpose now. Tonight you'll serve in the sanctuary during moonrise offerings. But before that, there's one small paradox to embrace. You, freshly shaved, smeared in natron, oiled like an almond in a summer salad, are about to put on a wig. That's right. All this meticulous depilation, this obsession with smoothness and purification, and now you'll be donning a mass of intricately curled black hair, sometimes reaching the shoulders, often perfumed, sometimes even laced with beads or small golden clasps. Why? Because paradox is just part of the sacred job description. Let's talk about wigs. They were everywhere in ancient Egypt. Nobles, officials, dancers, even the gods in art wore them. But for priests, it was especially strange. The same man who shaved every square inch of skin would then carefully place a carefully crafted wig on his gleaming skull before stepping into a public ceremony. And not just for show. The wig served a function. Or rather, several. First, there's symbolism. The wig wasn't just fake hair, it was idealized hair. Perfectly shaped, symmetrical, undisturbed by weather or lice. It allowed the priest to present a divinely correct appearance. Your natural head? Unpredictable, prone to sweat, stubble, and those awkward tufts by the ears. But the wig? Pure visual harmony. Second, hygiene. Ironically, wigs were cleaner than real hair, easier to remove, easier to maintain, less risk of infestation. You could store them in cedar boxes lined with scented cloth, scrub your actual head daily, and wear the wig only when needed. Think of it as ancient Egypt's answer to a dry shampoo and go lifestyle. And third, ritual conformity. Some rites, particularly those reenacting mythic stories or performed in front of statues of gods, required the priest to appear not just clean, but transformed. The wig helped complete that transformation. You weren't just a man. You were a representative of something bigger. A visual echo of the divine. Now for a fun historical tidbit. Many wigs were made of human hair, but others used plant fibers or wool for the non-temple types. Some had a wax base. Some were stitched into skullcaps. And yes, there are records of temples employing professional wigmakers, priests of the comb and needle. Imagine their job interviews. What are your strengths? Volume and bounce. Also, spiritual resonance. You arrive in the wig room, a small chamber with wooden hooks on the walls and low benches for preparation. A temple attendant is already waiting for you. He greets you with a silent nod and gestures toward your assigned piece. A shoulder-length wig of black hair, with subtle braiding at the temples and the faint scent of cedar and juniper clinging to its fibers. You sit. The attendant steps behind you, steady hands lifting the wig, inspecting it for errant threads or misplaced curls. With practiced care, he lowers it onto your scalp. It's cool at first, a gentle contrast to your still warm skin. He adjusts it, pressing at the temples, checking symmetry. A small mirror is handed to you, bronze, convex, more shimmer than reflection. You look familiar again. Not like yourself, but like the version of yourself the temple requires. A mirror priest, a smooth-faced man with idealized hair, whose every inch has been curated for ritual. It's strange, isn't it, that in this society so obsessed with purity and the removal of the natural, artifice still has its place. The wig is not your real hair, and yet it's more appropriate than your real hair could ever be. This blending of falseness and faith runs deep in temple life. And historians still argue, were wigs worn in every rite, or only major ones? Some texts suggest they were mandatory. Others imply they were optional, symbolic, or used only for outdoor processions where the sun demanded something more dramatic. We may never know for sure. But tonight, you wear one. And you adjust it just slightly, smoothing a strand that's decided to curl inward near your brow. The irony isn't lost on you, that the brow you shaved earlier is now brushed by a curl of someone else's hair. You rise. The attendant bows. You leave the wig room with your new silhouette, a hybrid of holy smoothness and carefully arranged illusion. As you walk the corridor again, now fully adorned, you pass another priest heading the opposite way. His wig shorter, more curled, perhaps a sign of rank or duty. You share a look. Neither of you smiles, but both of you understand. You are part of the same elegant contradiction. Bald beneath the braid, clean beneath the costume. And now for your offbeat debate of the night. Did the gods themselves wear wigs? Some statues show divine beings with elaborately plaited hair that looks suspiciously wig-like. Were these stylized depictions of real divine hair? Or was even the divine subject to the beauty standards of temple fashion? Scholars still argue, though one cheeky papyrus fragment simply reads, Ra wore his crown atop his wig. Of course he did. You step into the final chamber before the sanctuary. The light here is low, almost blue, with thin incense curling around your wig's edges. Your skin is clean, your scalp hidden, your expression neutral. You've become the image of sacred readiness. You are smooth, you are prepared, and you are wearing someone else's hair. The door ahead looms tall and heavy, carved from cedarwood, bound in bronze. Its surface is etched with ancient scenes. Priests offering lotus blossoms, gods seated beneath palm trees, Anubis weighing hearts in his jackal calm. Two acolytes flank it now, heads bowed, each holding a long incense reed. They do not speak. This is the threshold to the inner sanctum, and you are about to cross it. But first, one last inspection. Not of your robe, not your wig. Your razor. Because while the sanctum is a place of reverence and prayer, it is also a place of precision. And sometimes, things must be trimmed on sight. A loose thread, a stray eyelash, a rebellious fuzz daring to emerge from your wrist. So, you carry your toolkit, a small lacquered box, no larger than a folded scroll. Inside, items worthy of a pharaoh's vanity. You open it slowly. A copper razor, polished until it gleams like rose gold. A pair of slender tweezers shaped like ibis beaks. A bone-handled scraper. A bundle of natron-dusted cloths. And beneath all that, a strip of obsidian wrapped in linen, your emergency blade. Razor sharp, silent, and deadly to both hair and hubris. You run your fingers across the copper's edge, feeling for chips. None. It's ready. Now here's a slice of mainstream history. Razors in ancient Egypt date back to at least 3000 BCE. Most were made of copper, but elite versions, used by priests and embalmers, were crafted from obsidian or even gold-plated bronze. They weren't disposable. They were treasures, passed down, honored, purified after every use. Some were even buried with their owners. The message? I may be dead, but I'm not showing up hairy in the afterlife. You close the box and nod. The acolytes step aside. The doors groan softly as they open inward. Cool air greets you. The scent of burning myrrh rolls over your feet like mist. Inside, shadows swirl around massive columns, their tops lost in darkness. In the center stands the holy shrine, sealed, silent, gold-tipped. You will not open it. Only the high priest may touch the god's resting place. But you will approach it. Carefully, cleanly. Your sandals, if you wore any, are gone. You walk barefoot now across smooth, chilled stone. Every step is measured, every breath slowed. The gods are near, and even your toes are expected to behave. But here's where the real secret begins. The sanctum is quiet, yes, but not still. There is always motion, small, sacred movements. A priest brushing away a fallen lotus petal, another straightening a linen offering cloth. And you lower yourself beside a low altar to polish the sacred knife. It has no blade anymore, it's ceremonial, dulled by years of touch. But even so, it must shine. And while you polish, your mind drifts to the people who once stood here centuries ago, going through the same motions. Did they feel the pressure of perfection? Did they also carry razors in secret folds of cloth? Did they, too, sometimes fear that a forgotten hair might ruin a rite? Because yes, there are stories. Tales whispered in temple kitchens, over bowls of lentil porridge and pickled radish. Stories of the unshaven priest, a man who dared enter the sanctuary with visible arm hair. The gods were not amused, or at least, the high priest wasn't. Some say the man was demoted to scroll sorting for the rest of his life. Others say his hair grew uncontrollably afterward, cursed by divine mockery. One scribe even claimed his eyebrows grew back inward. Historians, of course, remain skeptical. There's little written proof. But that doesn't stop the priests from checking their arms twice before entering. As you continue polishing, you glance sideways. Another priest is inspecting a feather fan, its ostrich plumes slightly out of alignment. He adjusts it carefully, then, yes, pulls out a set of tweezers and plucks a hair from the fan's shaft. Not his own hair, the fan's. Because everything here must be immaculate. And that brings us to your quirky tidbit. There were full-time temple barbers. Not barbers in the market sense, but trained personnel whose sole job was to ensure the priests remained shaved, polished, presentable. Some sources suggest these barbers had to swear oaths themselves, to avoid contaminating the priests they shaved. And if they slipped, nick a chin, leave a patch, draw a single drop of blood, they were banished from the temple for days, sometimes weeks. So, naturally, some priests learned to shave themselves. Hence the obsession with personal razors, tools not of vanity, but of survival. And here comes your scholarly squabble of the night. Historians still argue whether shaving was a priestly innovation or an inheritance from earlier cultic traditions. Some point to earlier Nubian influences, where head shaving was ceremonial. Others believe it began as plague prevention, lice control, then got absorbed into theology. Either way, it stuck. For thousands of years. You finish your task. The knife gleams dully, content in its symbolic slumber. You rise, step back, and bow toward the shrine. The god inside, Amen, Horus, remains veiled, unreachable. But you feel its presence. Not like a voice, more like a weight, a stillness that watches. You walk backwards out of the chamber, never turning your back, never making a sound. When you return to the outer corridor, the light is different. Softer. Evening has begun to creep in, brushing its blue fingers against the edges of the temple walls. You exhale. Still smooth, still sacred. And you never even needed the emergency obsidian. The blue hush of twilight is setting in as you emerge from the sanctuary, the sun finally slipping beneath the western horizon like a golden coin falling into the Nile. Everything is quieter now, the wind softer, the stone beneath your feet holding a gentle warmth rather than midday's heat. Shadows stretch longer, and torches sputter to life in wall brackets with the sleepy indifference of servants who've done this every evening for centuries. You're on your way back to the purification chamber, again. Because now that you've exited the Holy of Holies, you must reset. Re-clean. Re-smooth. Yes, even though you didn't sweat, even though you didn't touch anything but a ceremonial blade dulled to butter knife levels. Even though, technically, you are still pristine. But ritual doesn't deal in technicalities. It deals in absolutes. You re-enter the washing room with slow, practiced steps. The marble pool has been refilled since morning, its surface broken only by the ripple of lotus leaves floating in lazy circles. You disrobe again, fold the linen precisely, and slide into the water with a sigh. Not of exhaustion, though that would be fair, but of resignation. The water closes around you like a second robe. And here's where we get to the real core of this strange, slippery calling. Depilation as devotion. It's not about appearances anymore. Not even about hygiene, though that's certainly a factor. No, this ritual, this shaving of skin until it sings with smoothness, this bathing again and again until your very soul feels steeped, it's a spiritual practice. A bodily form of prayer. A submission not to beauty standards, but to sacred order. In Egyptian thought, the body was a temple within a temple. A microcosm, a structure in need of constant tending, pruning, and alignment. If the physical form was flawed, the spiritual one couldn't fully commune with the divine. So you shave, and scrub, and oil, and repeat. You become not yourself, but a neutral conduit for the gods to act through. Your humanness, your hair, your scent, your rough edges, all quietly erased. Now for your historical core. Depilation as a sacred act existed beyond the priesthood, but priests perfected it. Many hieroglyphic records describe priests shaving before festivals, lunar ceremonies, and funerals. Papyrus scrolls detail the process step by step. Wash, oil, shave, rinse, scrub, inspect. Miss a step? Risk being struck from the ceremony entirely. That's how important hairlessness was. And here's tonight's quirky gem. There's a story, half fable, half warning, of a temple singer who forgot to shave one arm before a new moon rite. She wore a long sleeve to hide it, thinking no one would notice. But a breeze lifted her robe at the worst moment, revealing the offending hairs to a very startled officiant. The rite was stopped. The singer was exiled for a month. And the high priest? He ordered an extra oblation of beer and incense to realign the balance. Hair, stopping rituals since 1320 BCE. And it's not just you. Everyone within the sacred complex must maintain this standard. Even those who don't directly handle offerings, scribes, attendants, even cooks, are expected to keep shaved, or at least closely trimmed. Some wear hairnets made of fine linen. Others adopt the half shave, where the head is bare but the eyebrows remain, usually among more lenient sects. But you're one of the strict ones. Temple of Amun, full cleanse, full removal, no eyebrows, no excuses. And yes, some historians continue to argue whether this level of smoothness was always enforced, or whether it became stricter over time. There's evidence that earlier dynasties were a little looser, pun intended, but by the New Kingdom, priests were practically polished statues. Whether that shift was spiritual or political, still hotly debated in scholarly circles, with entire conference panels titled things like Hair and the Divine, a semiotic reassessment. Back in the pool, you finish scrubbing. The water now smells faintly of natron and crushed lotus. You rise, droplets trailing from your arms, your scalp, your browless brow. A soft cloth waits nearby, warmed slightly by a nearby brazier. You wrap yourself in it, patting carefully. No rubbing, no tugging. A single irritated patch of skin could disqualify you from tomorrow's rites. And speaking of skin, it glows. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the brass mirror once again. A face utterly blank of adornment. No hair, no lines, no smile. You look like a placeholder for a soul, not yet inked in. You redress slowly, tying your sash with the methodical grace of someone who's done this hundreds of times. Then, oil again. Just a trace, this time, a sandalwood blend. A soft sheen on the arms, chest, and behind the ears. The scent rises subtly, clean and warm. And now you're ready again. For what? Nothing in particular. You may sweep the altar room. You may assist with evening chants. You may simply sit, cross-legged by the sacred wall, reciting hymns from memory into the still air. Because being ready is the point. Not performance, not action, but readiness. You step out into the corridor once more. The torchlight flickers golden against the stone, catching the curve of your cheekbone, the sharp line of your bare jaw. You move like a statue brought to life, smooth and silent. And you think, perhaps this is what the gods wanted all along. Not grand gestures, not loud faith. Just stillness, cleanliness, and an absence of unnecessary hair. The night settles in with its usual softness, like a velvet cloth draped over the temple's shoulders. Distant chants echo faintly from the outer halls, low, repetitive, soothing. Somewhere, a scribe recites from a papyrus scroll by oil lamp glow. But in this chamber, it is quiet, almost reverent. You're kneeling on a reed mat, head bowed, hands poised over a small alabaster jar. Inside, an unguent thick as honey and fragrant enough to outshine memory. It smells of frankincense, cinnamon, blue lotus, and something muskier, maybe cardamom, maybe thyme itself. You dip 2 fingers in. The unguent is soft, but weighty, the way sacred things always are. You press it gently to your throat, your wrists, the hollow just behind your ears. Then, carefully, beneath each armpit. Because here's the thing. When you're a priest in ancient Egypt, you must smell like a god. Not just pleasant, not just clean, divine. And to smell divine, you must first be hairless. Let's unpack that. Body odor, as you know, clings to hair. It builds up, it lingers, it broadcasts itself. A single mist patch under the arm, and suddenly your sacred chant smells less like heaven and more like a goat paddock on a sunny afternoon. Which is why priests didn't just shave for aesthetics or purity. They shaved to make perfume possible. You couldn't apply sacred oils to skin covered in hair. The scent wouldn't settle right. The symbolism would tangle. It would be like putting flowers in a compost pile and calling it an altar. So yes, smooth skin was a canvas. One that allowed these complex, labor-intensive, carefully guarded perfume recipes to do their work. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Egyptian priests were among the most perfumed people in the ancient world. They didn't just wear scent, they prepared it. In temple labs, away from public view, specialists ground resins, fermented oils, mixed fat with flowers, then let the concoction sit for months in the cool dark. Some formulas were so prized they were locked behind sealed doors. Some had ingredients shipped from lands as far as Punt and Mycenae. You smooth more unguent down the inside of your arms. Your skin drinks it in, gratefully. No hair to block it. No scent to compete. The jar you're using now is reserved for high rites only. It's called Hesman, a blend so thick it's applied like salve, not splashed. And here's your fringe tidbit for the night. Certain temples, particularly in Thebes, believed that the scent of sacred oil could carry a prayer upward. That scent was not an afterthought. It was a language. And the cleaner your body, the louder your message. You reach for the second jar now, this one a cone. Yes, a literal cone. Made of scented wax, designed to rest atop the head, slowly melting with the wearer's body heat and releasing fragrance throughout the ceremony. You've worn these before. They are divisive, a bit drippy, but effective. You place the waxy cone on your wig. It sits like a soft crown, humming with essence of lily and cinnamon. You're not worried about stickiness. Your head beneath the wig is clean and oiled. Everything is layered, intentional, ritualized. This leads us to an awkward question. Did priests ever smell bad? Short answer, rarely. Long answer, only by accident, and when they did, it was a scandal. There's a story, a quiet temple whisper, about a young assistant priest who ate too many garlic stews before a high rite. He sweated through his robes, overpowered the perfume cones, and was asked to leave midway through the hymn. Not because he failed spiritually, but because he failed olfactorily. Cleanliness, here, is total, and that includes your scent. Now for your academic argument of the evening. Historians still argue whether these unguents and perfumes were used daily, or only on feast days. Some temple records suggest daily application. Others imply that the perfume rite was reserved for special rituals, and day-to-day duties required only oil. But a few scrolls contain shopping lists that include 1 jar hesman per chamber, renewed weekly, which implies a lot of sacred scenting. You finish your unguent ritual by rubbing a trace of perfume into the palms of your hands. These are the hands that will carry offerings, ring ceremonial bells, lift papyrus scrolls in midnight chants. They must be ready, scented, sanctified. As you rise, you feel it, that strange duality again. You are fragrant, polished, pristine, but also blank, anonymous, depersonalized, like a mirror. You are not yourself. You are the vessel. Outside the chamber, the wind brushes through a papyrus screen. A faint rustle. Another priest passes, nods. You both smell faintly of the same oil. It's a quiet communion, this perfume. A way of saying, I, too, have erased myself for the gods. You walk toward the offering court. Your shadow follows in silence. Smooth, scented, sacred. And behind you, the perfume cone begins to melt, slowly, steadily, like a candle praying to the stars. The stars have emerged now, one by one, like slow-burning embers pricked into the fabric of the sky. The temple breathes under their glow. Wind hums low through stone corridors, and from somewhere far off, the soft ringing of sistra drifts in like the lull of a distant tide. You are standing at the edge of the outer courtyard again, still barefoot, still clean, still cloaked in that delicate sheen of oil and sacred scent. But under the night sky, something shifts. The temperature cools, and so too does your skin. You feel more exposed somehow, more aware of each smooth patch, each hairless line across your arms and scalp. The rituals are mostly over now. Only the night duties remain. Still, you must prepare again. Because even under moonlight, even in silence, you are watched. There's a low bench along the courtyard wall. Upon it sits a small, tightly wrapped linen bundle. You know what's inside, a kit. Not unlike your earlier shaving box, but simpler. More practical. This one is for touch-ups. Because let's be honest, hair doesn't stop growing just because the sun goes down. You sit on the edge of the bench, unwrap the kit with care. Inside, a small copper razor, a soft pumice cloth, and a jar of water perfumed with spearmint and myrrh. You wet your fingers, then begin a careful inspection of your arms, elbows, wrists, the line of your jaw. You drag the blade lightly, not really to shave, but to remind the follicles who's in charge. This is not vanity. This is vigilance. You glance up. Another priest moves past in the shadows. You recognize him only by posture, broad shoulders, slight stoop from scroll work. He nods faintly, and you both return to your quiet rituals. Because here's tonight's mainstream fact. Egyptian priests were expected to maintain their shaved state at all times. Not just during daylight ceremonies. Not just during festivals. Even during sleep, during prayer, during silence. To be caught with visible stubble, even at night, was grounds for reprimand. At best, extra duties. At worst, exclusion from rites until re-cleansed. Some temples employed nighttime assistants who would patrol the priest quarters, gently rousing anyone whose skin had begun to revert to its natural, impure state. A single whisper, "Check your chin," and the unfortunate soul would rise, groggy but obedient, and reach for their blade. And here's a fringe tidbit to add to your mental catalog. There was a rumor among priests that certain oils, especially those blended with extract of papyrus root, could slow hair growth. Whether it was true or not, priests swore by it. Some even rubbed their scalps nightly while reciting a soft incantation. May the roots sleep until Ra returns. Science? Debatable. Faith? Undeniable. You finish your inspection. No fuzz. No stubble. Still smooth. You stand, shake out your robe, and begin your final duties of the evening. You cross the courtyard slowly now. The moon has risen full, bright enough to paint your bare arms with silver. The offering court is quiet, but ready. A few loaves of consecrated bread rest beneath a linen veil. Clay jugs of water and wine stand nearby, their surfaces beaded with dew. Your job now is simple: to refresh the altar. No grand gestures, just small, silent offerings. Replace the old bread with new. Pour clean water into the basin. Light a fresh bit of myrrh in the corner urn. And yet, your body must still be perfect. Because the gods see all, especially at night. That's the belief anyway. The moon, to the ancient Egyptians, was not just a light in the sky. It was an eye, the eye of Horus, watching, judging, glowing through darkness. Its beams were sacred, and to step into them unprepared, unshaven, unwashed, was unthinkable. And here's a scholarly debate to keep your brain lightly awake. Did priests ever ritually shave at night? Some sources suggest yes, especially before moon rites or dream rituals. Others argue it wasn't necessary unless participating in ceremonies. But one particular text from a temple in Dendera describes a midnight cleanse, where priests would enter a pool and re-shave by moonlight, the water reflecting the stars. You like that idea, actually. You imagine a row of priests along the water's edge, razors glinting pale in the night, their reflections shivering beside them. It sounds like a dream, a holy dream. You light the final urn, the myrrh catching quickly, releasing that earthy sweetness that smells of temples and tombs and time itself. The flames dance, and you let your gaze soften. Your body, hairless and lightly perfumed, no longer feels like something you wear. It feels like an echo, a borrowed vessel, a form used to preserve a fragile balance. The smoothness becomes part of the silence. The silence becomes part of the night. You step back from the altar, bow once, and retreat to the courtyard edge. The torchlight flickers low, the wind has quieted, and somewhere beyond the temple walls, the Nile moves, slow, dark, eternal. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You'll shave, you'll scrub, you'll oil, you'll erase yourself one layer at a time. But for now, you sit. Your head tilts toward the sky, smooth and sacred beneath the stars. The stars have shifted slightly, and the moon is higher now, rounder, whiter, casting a faint halo onto the temple's highest pylon. You haven't spoken in hours. Words are unnecessary tonight. Instead, you listen to the crackle of a nearly spent torch, the rhythmic padding of sandaled feet, the soft hum of distant prayers still echoing down from the hypostyle hall. You're waiting now, not for a vision, not for a miracle. You're waiting for the barber. Yes, even in a place of stillness and ritual, there are appointments to keep. And this one is important. He arrives without sound, of course, wrapped in pale linen, with a narrow bronze kit strapped neatly across his chest. He glides into the chamber with the eerie efficiency of someone who knows he's handling sacred real estate. You nod. He nods. Neither of you needs to say what this is for. Because while you may be careful, diligent, even, the barber's eyes are sharper than yours. He's trained to spot the beginnings of a shadow on the jawline, the faintest fuzz at the nape of the neck, the micro stubble that forms like quiet rebellion across the shin. And here's your historical core for this chapter. Temple barbers were specialists. They weren't the same as the street barbers who offered shaves in the market for a copper deben and a crust of bread. These were elite, trained in ritual hygiene, sworn to secrecy, cleansed before and after every appointment. Many were priests themselves, lower ranked, yes, but still bound by the same codes of purity. And yes, there were consequences if a temple barber made a mistake. You sit quietly on the low stool provided, palms resting face up on your knees. The barber begins his inspection. No words, just light touches. Fingers brushing under your chin, sliding along your cheek, tilting your head gently to catch the moonlight. He leans in close, his breath barely there. You don't move. You've learned not to flinch, even when the blade grazes skin like a whisper. And here's your offbeat tidbit. Temple barbers used their own set of purified blades, often dedicated to a single person. Shared razors were taboo, considered spiritually dangerous, as if using another's blade might invite their spiritual residue into your skin. Imagine borrowing a friend's toothbrush and accidentally summoning their dreams. That level of personal. The barber shaves a line beneath your chin. Just a flick, then another along the jaw. You hear the tiny rasp of hair being lifted and scraped away, so faint it almost disappears into the rustle of palm fronds outside. And then, the inspection. He steps back, squints, leans in again, and lifts a pair of bone-handled tweezers from his kit. He plucks a single hair, from your left brow ridge. You don't wince. You're proud of that. The hair was likely invisible to your own reflection, but to him? An unforgivable guest. He oils his hands and rubs a light sheen along your scalp, smoothing it in with the flat of his fingers. A cooling balm follows, something eucalyptus-like and sharp. It tingles in your pores, which are now wide open from the shave. The whole thing takes no more than 10 minutes. But afterward, you feel reborn. The barber wipes his tools, bows, and leaves without a word. You remain on the stool a moment longer, letting the air cool your face. The skin feels tighter now, brighter, faintly tingling as if blessed. This brings us to a debate still whispered in scholarly circles. Were the barbers more powerful than they seemed? Some historians argue that they were ritual enforcers, quiet agents of the temple who ensured no priest became lax. That their blades served not just to shave, but to discipline. Others scoff. Glorified hairdressers, they say. But anyone who's felt that razor near their eye, that quiet judgment behind a bone comb, knows better. You stand and stretch your limbs. A breeze drifts in from the east, rustling the hem of your robe. You walk slowly toward the moonlit corridor again, passing a shadowed statue of Thoth, god of scribes, with his ibis head tilted just so. He watches you, as if checking for a missed patch of hair behind your ear. You pause to check. Nothing. Still smooth. You smile, faintly. Because the truth is, the shaving, the oiling, the endless grooming, it changes you. Not just physically, mentally. It rewires your awareness. You begin to notice things. A crease in linen where none should be. A grain of natron left unmixed. The texture of your own breath as it leaves your nose. Hair, you've realized, dulls perception. Not literally, of course, but symbolically. It's noise, wildness, chaos, and when it's gone, what's left is stillness, precision, you. You pass another priest in the hallway. He's fresh from his own appointment, his scalp gleaming, his eyebrows suspiciously absent. You nod. He nods. No words needed. Tonight, the temple is silent. But the razors have spoken. The moon has passed its highest point now, tilting westward, casting long slanted light through the open clerestories and onto the smooth flagstones below. The temple breathes in its nighttime rhythm. Torches sputter low, voices hush into whispers, and the air feels cooler, laced with the scent of desert wind and ancient wood. You're heading, once again, toward the purification chamber. Not for a shave this time. For a scrub. And not just any scrub. Tonight's treatment: exfoliation with powdered stone, date husk, and, brace yourself, crocodile dung. Again. Because yes, it's back. You cross through a quiet courtyard and into the small antechamber where jars are lined up like votive offerings, small, clay, sealed with beeswax. One of them bears your mark. You pick it up, crack the seal. The scent is unmistakable. Sour, mineral, faintly smoky, like something ground up under the sun for too long. You dip 2 fingers in and feel the coarse texture. It's going to sting. But that's part of the point. Tonight's ritual isn't about cleanliness so much as refinement. You've shaved, oiled, bathed a dozen times already, but skin, as the elders remind you, must also be renewed. The outer layer of yourself, dead cells, old oils, the residue of the world, must be gently, firmly, scraped away. You kneel by the low basin and begin with the arms. Rub in circles. The grit bites, but you keep going. Elbows, shoulders, chest, even your scalp gets a pass. You wince once when the grain hits a sensitive spot behind the ear, but pain is part of it, too. It sharpens your attention. It makes you focus on the physical, the now. And here's your mainstream fact. Exfoliation wasn't an occasional indulgence in ancient Egypt, it was regular maintenance. Papyrus scrolls record dozens of recipes for skin smoothing. Crushed date pits mixed with honey, pumice with milk, natron blended with olive oil. Even powdered alabaster found its way into beauty regimens, though only for the truly elite. And priests? Priests were expected to glow. You move to your legs now. Calves first, then the knees. This part's oddly satisfying, like scraping away the day itself. You remember your first time, years ago, how you thought it was unnecessary, excessive. But now, it feels meditative, like polishing a sacred statue. And in a way, that's what you are. A statue in motion. Now here's tonight's quirky tidbit. One preserved beauty manual recommends mixing powdered lizard bone into exfoliation paste to smooth the roughness of man. The implication? That the male body, naturally chaotic and coarse, required extra correction to become presentable. Ancient skincare with a touch of ancient gender commentary. You finish the scrub with a rinse, lotus water, cool and faintly perfumed. You pour it slowly from a tall, narrow-necked jar, watching the paste slide off your skin like a discarded mask. You dry with soft linen, noting how your arms feel raw, almost electric. The skin is pinker now, thinner, new. This is how the temple teaches you to think of yourself, not as a fixed form, but as something sculpted daily. Hair is not the only thing that must be removed. So must old cells, tired habits, unwanted thoughts. Every act of cleansing is also an act of subtraction. You dress again, this time in a looser robe, less stiff, meant for night watch. You run your fingers lightly over your forearms. Smooth, glossy, like wet stone under torchlight. And now, just as you're stepping out, an elder priest enters, bald, serene, a smile hiding somewhere behind his deep-set eyes. He raises one eyebrow, or would, if he had any. Still glowing, "I see," he murmurs. You bow. The crocodile dung helps. He snorts softly. Everything helps, even belief. You pass him in the doorway, your shoulders brushing linen as you go. There's a quiet understanding between you both that this endless polishing, this ritual of reduction, isn't just tradition. It's transformation. Back in the corridor, the wind has changed. It carries a faint dust now, blowing in from the desert beyond the temple walls. You breathe it in, not because it's pleasant, it's not, but because it reminds you what lies outside: roughness, dryness, the world. And what you've done tonight, again, is choose to shed that world. Historians still debate whether these exfoliation rituals were spiritual or simply aesthetic. Some argue that the symbolism was layered. To scrape away the surface was to reveal the divine underneath. Others say it was merely about presentation, cleanliness as currency, as one scholar put it. Yet others believe it had medical roots: lice, infection, disease. A practical habit raised to holiness. The truth, you suspect, is simpler: it felt right. When your skin is smooth, when your scent is clean, when your shape is quiet, so too is your mind. The world stops pressing against you. You can disappear into your function, into service, into silence. You return to your quarters now, robe fluttering in the warm breeze. You slide into your sleeping alcove, a shallow stone niche lined with reed matting and soft cloth. You lay flat, arms at your sides, scalp cool against the linen. And you feel it. Not exhaustion exactly. Not even peace. You feel emptiness, in the good way. The kind of emptiness that comes after letting go of too much. The kind of emptiness that leaves room for something sacred to move in. The moonlight pools gently over your feet. You pull your robe tighter. Your breath slows. Tomorrow, it begins again. But tonight, you rest. Hairless, scrubbed, bare. Ready. The morning wakes gently, not with a blare of sound, but with the whisper of reed curtains rustling in a warm breeze. The temple has not yet stirred, the oil lamps flicker low, and the courtyard lies in soft shadow, dappled with early light. You're already awake. In truth, you never slept deeply. Sleep here is light, woven with the rhythms of wind and footsteps, interrupted now and then by the creak of wood or the shift of linen. A temple priest does not chase dreams. He listens to silence. You rise, Smooth your robes, and stretch, not too far, not dramatically. Every movement here is precise, as if watched. Even in private, you behave like the gods might be peeking in. You reach for your mirror, bronze, convex, a little tarnished, and hold it up to your face. And there it is. The horror. A tiny, defiant, half-millimeter patch of dark hair, nestled like a scandal just below your ear. You stare at it in disbelief. It wasn't there last night. You know this. You scrubbed, you oiled, you glowed. And now, it mocks you. A single rebellious whisker with ambitions beyond its station. You exhale through your nose. No panic. Not yet. You open your kit and retrieve your razor. Copper, clean, sharp. You lean in. Tilt your head. Angle for the best light. But you pause. Because suddenly, you remember. The tale of the bearded priest. A story whispered during dusk watch, shared between initiates with half-concealed smirks. According to legend, during the reign of Horemheb, one young priest, dutiful, bright, freshly promoted, began to question the practice of full-body shaving. What does it matter? He supposedly asked. The gods see the heart, not the hair. And for a time, he got away with it. He trimmed, sure, but didn't shave. Let his eyebrows grow back in. Wore longer sleeves to hide the forearms. He even tied his sash a little higher to obscure a suspiciously hairy chest. He claimed it was more natural, that the gods must know man by his true form, that perhaps the ancient razors were wrong. You recall how the story ends. The high priest discovered the truth during a purification ritual. The young man's robe slipped slightly, revealing not just fuzz, but actual curls. Chest hair, on a servant of the gods. The chamber froze. A scribe dropped his brush. One priest fainted. He was expelled, the tale goes, not just from the temple, but from every ritual circle in the district. Wandering and disgraced, he became a street prophet, shouting about divine follicles until no one listened anymore. His fate became a warning. Never confuse your own comfort for sacred clarity. The gods don't want your truth. They want your smoothness. You scrape the whisker away with a swift, practiced stroke. Gone, as if it had never been there. The skin underneath is pink, but clean. Crisis averted. You finish your inspection. No other rogues appear. You oil lightly, fold your robe, and prepare for the day. And now, here's your mainstream fact. Some priests did, occasionally, protest the shaving rituals. There are rare texts, mostly marginal notes, scribbled in the corners of scrolls, that suggest a few temple factions felt the constant grooming was a distraction from the spiritual. They argued for simpler rituals, inner purity, and less dependence on oils and razors. But they were, in time, overruled. The cults of cleanliness prevailed, and the razors remained sharp. Still, those quiet protests leave a shadow in the historical record, a trace of humanity beneath all the order. And here's your delightfully fringed tidbit. One particular ostracon, a pottery shard used as a notebook, was found inscribed with what seems to be an angry poem from a frustrated junior priest. It reads something like, "O blade of bronze, O cursed edge, my face you flay without a pledge. I serve the gods, but not with glee, for they have stolen brows from me." Scholars aren't sure if it was satire, rebellion, or just a joke scratched out during a long temple watch. But either way, it proves that even in the most orderly places, dissent still twitched beneath the surface like a stubborn hair. You step outside into the corridor. The sun has risen higher now, gilding the upper walls in honeyed light. A small group of acolytes pass by, whispering, robes pressed, faces gleaming. You walk among them like a reflection, smooth and silent. You pause briefly before a column, its carvings catching your eye. It's Thoth again, scribe of the gods, wise and beaked, holding a reed pen in one hand and a scroll in the other. His stone feathers are perfect, his expression calm. But his chin? Also bare. You smile faintly. Even Thoth, it seems, submits to the razor. And that's the truth you keep coming back to. The ritual is not about you, not about your comfort, not about what you feel is necessary. It's about something older, something larger, the balance, the order, Ma'ah. Hair, in all its wild, willful glory, is chaos. And chaos has no place here. You turn back toward the preparation chamber, already imagining the feel of oil on your fingertips, the quick pull of the razor, the smell of warmed natron. And behind you, just for a moment, the faintest breeze lifts the hem of your robe. The gods saw nothing. By mid-morning, the temple hums with a quiet rhythm, rituals flowing, incense curling, robes rustling in and out of shadow like white-winged birds. You're making your way toward the library hall now, where scribes lean over scrolls and styluses tap softly like insects on bark. It's a different kind of sacred space, still, methodical, fragrant with ink and old papyrus. But as you walk, you can't help but glance out toward the eastern courtyard, where petitioners gather beyond the sacred threshold. Farmers, merchants, weavers, children, ordinary people, dusty and sun-browned, faces creased from wind and work. You watch them like someone staring at a memory. Because they don't look like you. They look hairy. Not grotesquely so, not wild or unkempt, but human, bearded elders with eyebrows so thick they seem carved from soot. Women with long plaits wrapped in linen scarves. Toddlers with fluffy tufts catching the sun. Hair, 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 everywhere. Brows, lashes, arms, chins, necks. You look down at yourself, bare as a river pebble. And for the first time in days, you remember what it was like not to be smooth. This is where things get interesting. Because here's your mainstream historical fact: the majority of ancient Egyptians did not shave. Not fully. They might trim. They might oil and perfume. But shaving the whole body? That was temple life, priest life, and it was expensive. Razors, oils, linen towels, scented scrubs. For the average person, grooming was more practical than philosophical. Comb out lice, play the hair, wash with water and hope for the best. So in many ways, your shaved scalp is a symbol, not of cleanliness but of class. Only the elite could afford this kind of grooming, and only those within temple walls had the time to keep up with it. Your depilated brow is a badge of status as much as spirituality. You feel it in the stares of those across the threshold. They don't scowl, but they do see you, your robes, your baldness, your deliberate movements. To them, you are something strange, otherworldly, untouchable. And that, you realize, is part of the design. Now comes a fringe observation from the records. There are occasional depictions of hybrid grooming among wealthier laypeople. Men with shaved heads but full beards, or women with clean-shaven arms and elaborately braided wigs. These were rare, stylized, possibly performative, but they hint at something deeper, a desire to emulate temple aesthetics, even without full access to the tools or training. In other words, the look of the priest mattered. It communicated power, devotion, refinement, and in a society where divine favor meant good harvests, good trade, good health, well, who wouldn't want to borrow a little of that shine? But here's your quirky tidbit. Some rural communities mocked the priestly look. A few surviving songs and festival chants include references to eyebrowless men who fear their own armpits, and bald-headed gods in skirts. These jabs were probably playful, but they reveal something important. Not everyone admired the smoothness. To some, it looked ridiculous. To others, it looked suspicious. Why would the gods demand such nakedness? One village elder is said to have asked, "Are they blind, or just picky?" And historians still argue this very point. Was priestly hairlessness about humility or arrogance? Some believe it was meant to show submission, shedding the body to serve the spirit. Others see it as a mark of superiority, a visual statement that said, "I am cleaner than you. I am closer to the divine." You lean against a column now, just inside the shade, and watch a mother outside comb her daughter's hair with slow, gentle strokes. The little girl winces as a knot is tugged. The mother laughs softly, a tender, human moment. You haven't combed anything in years. Not your scalp, not your brows, not your body. You have no knots, no tangles, no strands to catch wind or hold warmth. And maybe that's why the breeze never feels like it used to. But still, you wouldn't go back. Because to be in the temple is to shed these things, to give them up willingly, not because hair is evil, but because in giving it up, you make a statement, "I belong to something else." You step away from the threshold, back into the cooler shadows. Another priest passes and nods. His scalp gleams like burnished bronze. You return the gesture. No one in here will ever braid your hair. but they will trust your hands with sacred relics, with spells, with gods. Outside, the people laugh and cough and chatter and squint into the sun. Inside, your world is silent, still, and smooth. You've made it back to the linen chamber, a quiet, shaded room with stone benches, reed mats, and shelves lined with the softest fabric the temple can afford. You're here to change into your formal afternoon robes, but what you're really here for is a moment of silence. And maybe, just maybe, to confront a particular question that's been nibbling at the corners of your mind like a mouse with divine opinions. How far did the shaving really go? It's one thing to remove your facial hair, your scalp, sure, even your arms and legs, predictable, standard priest protocol. But what about beneath the kilt? Yes, that. You sit on the bench and run a hand slowly over your freshly shaved shin. Smooth, warm, slightly fragrant from yesterday's almond oil. You glance at the pile of linen to your left, folded precisely to cover what the temple prefers remain veiled. And then you remember your first day in training. The look on your mentor's face when he handed you your personal razor and said, with absolutely no irony, all means all. Here's your mainstream fact. Priests in ancient Egypt were expected to remove every strand of hair, including pubic hair. Complete depilation, full body grooming, total follicular surrender. It wasn't a suggestion. It was sacred law. To leave even one region wild was to risk inviting impurity into the ceremony. And so it was done. Quietly, carefully, in private. You remember how awkward it felt the first time, crouched behind a linen screen, trying not to nick anything important. The blade was unfamiliar. The angle, absurd, but you did it, because you had to, because the gods, supposedly, noticed everything. Over time, you got better, faster, less hesitant. Now, it's simply another part of the rhythm. You hardly think about it anymore. Except, sometimes, you do. Because here's your quirky tidbit. Some priests, especially the older ones, developed elaborate grooming systems. Not just razors, but a rotating set of cloths, herbal balms, post-shave salves, and cooling fans operated by silent acolytes. The high priests of Karnak reportedly used antelope hair exfoliating mitts, followed by a splash of chilled rosewater steeped with mint and pomegranate rind. If that sounds indulgent, that's because it was. Even purification, in the right circles, had a hierarchy. But here's where things get sticky, and not from the bomb's privacy. There is none. Not really. When everyone is expected to be hairless, everyone is also expected to check everyone else. Especially before public rites, inspections happen, quickly, discreetly, but still. You remember a particularly humiliating episode. A junior priest from the incense wing who'd missed a single patch behind his knee. He was stopped mid-step on his way to the sanctuary. Two older priests pulled him aside, lifted his robe, and pointed. He didn't serve that day. The shame, like the patch, lingered longer than it should have. Historians continue to debate how thoroughly this process was enforced. Some records hint that only the visible areas mattered, that certain, let's say, shadowy zones were overlooked unless scandalously unkempt. Others insist that temple purity was absolute and nothing could be overlooked. No one quite agrees. But you know what you were taught. All means all. You unfold the ceremonial robe now, a more elaborate garment, layered and edged with fine embroidery. Not decorative, but symbolic. The patterns echo the shape of the primeval mound, the first land to rise from Nun's watery chaos. The gods, it seems, appreciate good tailoring. You pull it on carefully, adjust the shoulder wrap, fasten the sash. Beneath it all, your skin is smooth, clean, ready. You've done the work. But still, the question lingers like a gnat in a sunbeam. Why this level of obsession? Is it really about cleanliness? Or is it about control? You've given up your hair, your scent, your softness, your secrets. You've shaped yourself to match a divine template written in copper razors and natron paste. You've been reshaped, sanded, polished, presented. And perhaps, beneath all the purification, there is a quiet message from the temple. If we can control the hair on your body, we can control everything. Scholars occasionally suggest this, too, that the rituals served to reinforce obedience, not just sanctity. That in removing your own hair, you are rehearsing the surrender of your will. You're not sure, but it fits. And yet, despite the doubts and the awkward stretches and the occasional razor burn, despite all that, there is a strange serenity in it. A rhythm, a repetition, a sacred silence carved from daily discomfort. You step out into the sun once again. Your robe catches the breeze. You walk toward the main hall, chin lifted, scalp glowing, entirely unbearded from crown to ankle. You feel like a statue in motion. And that's the point. The gods don't want your hair. They want your discipline. The sun now leans westward, gilding the edge of every temple wall and statue, warming the ancient sandstone into hues of copper and honey. As the light deepens, the rhythm of the temple slows. Morning's flurry of rites and scrubs has softened into a quieter pace, scrolls unrolling in the scribe's hall, soft clinking of water jars, the low murmur of prayer echoing off worn pillars. You, freshly robed, bare as always beneath the linen, turn left instead of right. Today, you're not heading for the usual purification chamber or the incense platform. No, today you've been summoned elsewhere. To the house of the priestesses. A rare visit, one that carries a quiet curiosity. You pass through an ivy-draped corridor and into a smaller courtyard, one most priests never enter. The energy here feels different, lighter, somehow. There's laughter tucked into the corners. The scent of rose oil and cardamom hangs in the air, and through the archway ahead you see them. The women of the temple. gliding through shadow and sun in their own carefully choreographed rituals. They see you too, of course. A man in their space. And smooth as you are, you feel suddenly exposed. Because while you and your brothers are expected to maintain total hairlessness, things are less rigid here. Some of the priestesses are shaven like you, arms, legs, head bare, shining beneath their thin veils. Others have kept their eyebrows, their lashes. A few wear their hair in long plaits, carefully oiled and threaded with gold wire. It's not random. It's not sloppiness. It's doctrinal divergence. You were warned about this. And here's your mainstream historical fact. While male priests were subject to strict, full-body shaving mandates, female temple servants and priestesses followed more varied practices. In some temples, especially in Thebes and Karnak, high-ranking women were expected to maintain a similar standard of cleanliness and shaving. But in others, particularly those dedicated to Hathor, Isis, or Bastet, hair was treated not as impurity, but as beauty, power, even sanctity. In short, women had options. And while that might sound liberating, it also complicates things. You're here to deliver a scroll. That's all. But as you pass between them, these women with smooth arms or dark curls, perfumed skin or bare heads, you can't help but feel fuzzy. Not physically, mentally. The contrast reveals something uncomfortable. You've been taught that hair equals chaos. But what if it doesn't? One priestess pauses as she moves past you, her gaze steady but not unfriendly. Her head is shaved, her arms are not. She wears a linen sash dyed faintly with saffron, marking her as a singer in the rites of Hathor. "You look uncomfortable," she says softly. Her voice is clear, calm, gently amused. You blink. "I'm not sure I'm meant to be here." She smiles. "You're not, but that's all right." She doesn't bow. She doesn't retreat. She just walks on, humming faintly, leaving behind a scent of lotus and logic. You exhale. And here's your quirky tidbit for the hour. In certain festivals, especially those honoring fertility deities, hair was grown out on purpose. Long tresses, uncut beards, symbolic pubic wigs crafted from wool or palm fiber. These were worn in procession, danced through the streets, offered as tribute to the creative chaos of life. Hair, in these moments, was not filth. It was celebration. And yes, some priestesses refused to shave entirely. Their reasoning? The goddesses themselves were never depicted bald. Isis had flowing locks. Hathor wore cow-horn headdresses woven through long, dark waves. To appear like your goddess, you must embody her. And to shave was to erase part of that identity. It's not rebellion. It's theology. You deliver the scroll. You say very little. You bow when you're meant to, and you retreat without hurry. But as you step back into your own corridors, your own carefully curated shadows, you find yourself thinking. Not just about doctrine, about discipline, but about choice. Because what you've always called purity might, in some places, be seen as erasure. And what you've always called chaos might be another name for beauty. Scholars still argue the point. Some call the priestess customs regional variants. Others call it heresy hidden in lace. But most agree. Temple roles were gendered, and so were their grooming codes. Not equally strict, not equally symbolic, not equally fair, but equally sacred in their own distinct ways. You reach your own chamber, sit on the reed mat, and run a hand across your scalp. Still smooth, still you. But somewhere, in the stillness behind your eyes, a quiet question lingers. If the gods gave us hair, why are we so determined to remove it? You do not answer. Not yet. You simply lie back, eyes closed, listening to the distant sound of women singing beneath the saffron sky. The sun has dipped fully behind the western pylon, and the sky is awash in indigo and rose, deepening with every breath. You walk slowly now, down a corridor gilded with the shadows of carved falcons and sun disks, each glyph catching the last light like a secret whispered in stone. You're returning to the sanctuary again. Not for offering. For inspection. Not of yourself, for once, but of the gods. Specifically, their statues. Because here in Egypt, the divine isn't only invisible, it is made visible, tangible, given form, and in nearly every case, glorious, immaculate, towering form, it is also bald. You pass through the doorway and enter the statue chamber, where the deity sits in shadow. Tonight, it is a smaller shrine, a limestone alcove holding a statue of Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, god of wisdom and balance. He is seated upright, gaze fixed forward, fingers curled around a stylus. His face is smooth, his head perfectly hairless. As always. Because, yes, gods don't do split ends. And here's your historical foundation for this moment. Almost all representations of gods in ancient Egyptian art are hairless. No beards, no eyebrows, no scruffy stubble, not even the tiniest tuft beneath a chin. What hair exists is stylized, wigs, crowns, ceremonial headdresses. Never natural, never disorderly. It's not that hair is evil. It's that hair is mortal. It grows, it tangles, it ages, it decays. The gods, by contrast, are eternal, perfect, polished. Statues reflect this ideal, made not from flesh, but from granite, alabaster, wood painted and lacquered until smooth enough to gleam beneath a single oil lamp. To maintain that surface is to maintain the illusion of divinity manifest. And your role tonight? Cleanse it, dust it, polish it. You step closer and dip your linen cloth into a bowl of lotus water. The scent rises, floral, sweet, a little bitter. You wring it out, fold it 3 times, and begin gently wiping the statue's chest. Circles, always clockwise, always with respect. You do not touch the face. Only the arms, the knees, the base of the feet. You whisper the cleansing words under your breath, a string of syllables you've recited so many times they've become part of your breath itself. And as you wipe, you think. Not just about cleanliness, but about the strange relationship between humans and their gods. Because we shape them in our image, yes, but then we reshape ourselves in theirs. Smooth them. Then smooth ourselves. A quiet echo. You glance at the ibis head. Its carved brow is blank, unlined, perfect. And then you remember something from your training. Once a year, in the festival of renewal, the statues were bathed and anointed, their skin rubbed with perfumed oil, their hair, even if only symbolic, shaved or redrawn. It was theater, but it was sacred theater, a chance to reaffirm the perfection of the divine. And here's your quirky gem of the night. Some temples actually applied fake eyebrows to statues during festivals. Not drawn, but placed, tiny arches of dark resin or wax, pressed into position with delicate tools. Just enough to suggest presence. Then removed again, a momentary nod to humanity. Then erased. You finish your wipe down and dip a brush into gold dust. Carefully, reverently, you trace the edges of the throne, refreshing the shimmer where time has dulled the glow. You don't speak, you barely breathe. Because this isn't polishing. This is prayer. And here comes the scholarly disagreement. Was the hairlessness of the gods a theological imperative, or simply artistic convention? Some argue that statues reflect ideals, not reality. That the gods were imagined as hairless to mark their separation from human frailty. Others claim it's practical. Hair, after all, is hard to sculpt in stone. But then there are the records. The rituals, the inspections, and the way even your own body has come to mirror theirs. Smoothness is not just cleanliness. It's lightness. You stand back from the statue. The oil lamp behind you flickers once, casting a new shadow across the figure's chest. For a moment, it looks alive. Not blinking, not moving, but present. You bow low, cloth still in hand. The statue does not respond. But you feel seen. You return your tools to their basket, blow out the lamp, and leave the chamber in darkness. Outside, the breeze brushes against your bare scalp. You run a hand over it, absently. No stubble yet. Good. And as you walk back through the colonnade, stars blooming slowly overhead, you begin to wonder. If a god were ever to walk among mortals, would we know them by their words? Or by their absence of hair? You smile at the absurdity of it, and yet it lingers. Because in this world you serve, perfection begins with the blade, and ends with a reflection. The temple has gone quiet in that particular way only midnight achieves. Not silence, exactly. No, there's always the low creak of ancient beams, the whisper of wind through high-set windows, the distant splash of water against stone from the purification pools. But everything now moves slower, dimmer, as if the temple itself exhales under the stars. You're still awake. You're in the anteroom of the embalming chamber tonight, not to assist with any ritual, but to sit, to reflect, and to wait. You've been chosen to help prepare a body. A recently deceased priest, elderly, respected. Hairless in life, of course. And now, in death, that smoothness must be maintained. Because even in the afterlife, no fuzz is allowed. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Priests who died were often reshaved after death. Before mummification, their bodies were cleansed, depilated, and perfumed once more, so they could enter the duat, the Egyptian underworld, as pure as they had lived. Any signs of hair regrowth were removed, not just as a courtesy, but as a sacred obligation. The gods did not want to receive a scruffy soul. So here you are, sharpening your blade by moonlight. And thinking, deeply, maybe for the first time, about what it means to stay hairless forever. The embalming chamber is cool, wrapped in the perfume of cedar oil and natron. The body lies beneath linen, waiting. You are not alone. 2 other priests join you, their heads bowed, faces unreadable. One lights incense. The other recites the ritual script softly, each line a breath. You remove the shroud and begin your work. The skin is fragile now. No pressure, just gliding strokes. Chin, chest, arms, a final cleansing. It feels holy. And a little terrifying. You've always shaved yourself as a ritual, a practice, a performance, even. But here, you're reminded. This is not just about life. It's about legacy, about how we present ourselves to the next world. Clean, calm, quiet, hairless. You remember a saying from one of your mentors, "We leave no tangles behind." At the time, you thought he meant linen. Now, you're not so sure. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some mummies of high-ranking priests were found with their bodies not only shaved, but their razors buried beside them. Personal tools, the instruments of their discipline. One such priest was even buried with a small mirror and a tiny jar of scented oil. A message, perhaps, to the gods. I will keep myself clean, even in eternity. Historians are still unsure if this was symbolic or practical. Some suggest the items were offerings. Others believe they were tools for the spirit to continue grooming in the afterlife, a sort of divine bathroom kit. You finish your task, the final stroke of the blade across the scalp, a gentle wipe with perfumed cloth. The other priests nod in solemn agreement. He's ready now. Ready to meet the gods. To stand in the hall of 2 truths. To speak his heart and show his body, flawless, smooth, unburdened. And as you step away, you glance at your own hands. Still steady, still clean, but for the first time, you wonder. How long will I keep this up? Forever? until your own body is laid on the same stone table? It's easy to imagine the day when you, too, will be shaved by moonlight. When some younger priest will whisper the prayer you now mutter over this old friend. It's not fear you feel. It's recognition. This is the final version of the ritual you perform every day. The full circle. Shaving not for service, but for surrender. Scholars still debate whether this final act was more about respect or fear. Were the priests sending the dead in perfect form out of love, or out of terror that an unshaven soul might be rejected by Osiris? You think both answers are true. You redress the body, fold the linen just so, knot the sash, replace the incense cone at the head. You bow, and you leave the chamber with the others. No one speaks. But there's something in the air that stays with you, a hush deep and solemn, like the silence left after a hymn ends. You step back out into the cool courtyard, the stars almost unnaturally bright. The moon has lowered now, and the wind feels sharper. It passes over your scalp, your jaw, your bare arms. It reminds you, gently but clearly, that you're still here. Still alive. Still smooth. And that each morning you wake up and pick up that blade, you're not just reenacting purity. You're rehearsing eternity. By late morning, the temple is in full motion again, but the sanctuary remains silent, its doors closed, its inner light dim. You're not there today. Instead, you've been reassigned to the periphery, just beyond the sacred core, to a narrow corridor where offerings are prepared and temple visitors are sorted, separated, sometimes subtly judged. And as you carry a fresh basket of pomegranate and barley bread from one room to another, you're stopped by a familiar voice. "You're one of the smooth ones," says the gatekeeper, half smiling beneath his uneven stubble. It's not mockery, it's observation, and he's not wrong. You are one of the smooth ones, one of the priests permitted to walk beyond the incense curtain, to handle the sacred tools, to whisper the divine names. But you can't help noticing, as you nod and continue on, that he's not smooth. Not at all. His arms are dark with hair. His chin sports a 3-day beard. His lashes curl long over amused eyes. He's clean, of course. No one in the temple is dirty, but he's not shaved. He doesn't need to be. And that brings you to a line that divides this place, the follicular divide between priests and everyone else. Lay workers, scribes, porters, temple guards, even singers. Many are permitted to keep their body hair, as long as they don't enter sacred space. And most don't mind. Some even take pride in their unshorn status, a sign they haven't been pressed too tightly into the system of purity that defines your every waking hour. But for you, and for those like you, that door is not open. You shave or you step down. No in between. And that rigid line, for all its holiness, has created a subtle tension over the years. The shaved are respected, certainly, but they are also distant. Watched, slightly removed from the warmth of common life, like ivory statues stored behind glass. You see it in the way temple guards make way for you, but do not meet your eye. You hear it in the whispered jokes between kitchen servants. You feel it in moments like this, when a man with sun-darkened arms and easy laughter calls you, "Smooth one," and walks on with the confidence of someone untouched by ritual burden. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Temple workers were divided not just by role, but by access, and that access often depended on purity. Purity, in turn, was visibly marked by the body. The cleaner the skin, the smoother the limbs, the more sacred your proximity. Some workers spent their entire lives in the outer precincts, never once permitted beyond the second gate, not because they lacked piety, but because they lacked depilation. This wasn't merely spiritual, it was structural. Cleanliness was surveillance. The less hair you had, the more you were trusted. And here's your quirky tidbit. There is a record, brief, but telling, of a festival gone slightly sideways when a group of singers from a lesser district attempted to enter the inner temple without first undergoing a shave. They had traveled far, were properly robed, even carried their instruments. But one guard stopped them, inspected their arms, and turned them away. The scroll notes that the leader of the group raised her voice and called the guard a donkey in human skin, which, to be fair, is quite a burn. They were allowed to perform eventually, but only after undergoing emergency grooming in the outer washroom. Legend says the guard insisted on personally inspecting their knees before giving the final nod. But of course, this raises a deeper question, one historians still wrestle with. Was all this hair removal about ritual or about control? Was it truly divine preference, or simply a system of maintaining boundaries between sacred and common, priest and worker, elite and ordinary? After all, you can't always tell someone's faith from their words, but you can tell whether they've shaved. Hair becomes a line of distinction, a kind of ancient uniform. You make your way through the passage toward the incense stores, thinking not about theology, but about that gatekeeper's eyes, the casual way he moved, the confidence of his hair-covered arms. You don't envy him, exactly, but you do feel the weight of your own polished silence. The ritual makes you disciplined, focused, capable of service. But it also makes you invisible. One among many, smoothed to sameness, your individuality buffed away like callus. You walk with reverence, but not with freedom. And still, you do it. Not because you fear punishment, though it's real. Not even because the gods demand it, though they do. You do it because the role is sacred. Because the gates open only for the smooth. Because you've built your life around this practice, and the act of shaving has become more than hygiene or obedience. It has become a language. One you speak with every silent step across polished stone. You arrive at the incense room, place the basket carefully by the altar shelf, and bow. You feel the robe settle over your shoulders, the faint tingle of freshly oiled skin beneath. You reach up, out of habit, and run a finger over your brow. Still smooth. Always smooth. And outside, beyond the temple gate, someone else squints into the sun, rakes fingers through their beard, and whistles a hymn you're no longer permitted to sing. The shadows lengthen as the sun leans low over the courtyard walls, and the temple begins to shift into its evening rhythm. a gentler cadence marked by softer chants, cooled stone, and the scent of incense blending with the first breath of night air. You've finished your afternoon duties. The bread offerings are in place, the ceremonial basin scrubbed clean, the scrolls re-shelved with their linen wrappings tucked precisely at the corners. Your limbs ache, not with pain, but with that subtle exhaustion that comes from stillness and exactitude. And yet, the day is not done. Not for you, because the next rite begins soon. And even now, with skin already smooth, scalp already shining, body already scrubbed raw and oiled twice over, there is one final thing you must do before standing once more before the gods. Shave again. It doesn't matter that there's no visible regrowth. It doesn't matter that the blade will barely find anything to cut. The ritual isn't about what can be removed. It's about proving you are willing to remove it anyway. A final gesture of control, of clarity, of absolute devotion. And so you return to the basin, not the large one used for morning ablutions, but the smaller, high-walled bowl tucked into a shadowed alcove near the entrance to the sanctuary. This is the pre-rite basin, reserved for those about to enter sacred space after midday. It's quiet here, and cool. A single oil lamp flickers nearby, throwing soft shadows on the carved falcon relief above the wall niche. You open your razor case once more, familiar copper glinting in the lamplight. You kneel on the mat, dip a cloth into the lotus-scented water, and draw it slowly over your face. The water is lukewarm now, just enough to soften the skin. You lather lightly with natron paste, made from last week's batch. You know the texture by touch. You don't need to look. And then, carefully, methodically, you begin. The razor glides along your jawline, removing nothing visible but leaving behind the faintest sting, the slightest pink trace, the subtle message. I am still clean. I have made sure. I offer no excuse. This practice isn't unique to you. Every priest assigned to the evening rites does the same, sometimes in silence, sometimes muttering prayers beneath their breath, sometimes humming half-remembered hymns from their novitiate days. Tonight, you're quiet. The only sound is the soft scrape of metal against skin and the occasional sigh of wind curling through the open clerestory above. Here's your mainstream historical anchor. Egyptian priests were known to shave multiple times a day, especially those serving in the innermost sanctuaries or performing rites to high deities like Amun or Ra. Some temple records indicate up to 3 shaves per 24-hour period. One before dawn, one before the midday offering, and one in preparation for sunset rituals. The idea was not that hair had grown back, it hadn't, but that impurity might have returned. Through thought, through contact, through air. And here's your fringe fact for the evening. There are some records, obscure, rarely cited, that mention ritual shaving of memory as a symbolic act. One scroll from the Temple of Khonsu refers to a priest who shaved his forehead while reciting verses to forget a personal sorrow, to clear the mind as one clears the brow. Was it literal? Was it poetic? Historians argue still. But the metaphor lingers. You complete your final pass with the razor. You rinse the blade, dry your face with soft linen. You touch your jaw, your cheeks, your scalp, no resistance. No stubble. You've succeeded. Again. You wrap the blade and cloths back into their pouch, tie the sash tight, and rise. Your robe hangs loose and weightless now. The evening breeze has crept in, curling against your ankles, brushing your exposed arms with the softness of an old friend. You feel light, not just clean, unburdened. And as you make your way toward the sanctuary for the dusk invocation, you realize something. This final shave, unnecessary though it may be, carries more weight than all the others. Because it happens when you are tired, when your muscles ache, when the day has already asked so much of you. And still, you return to the blade, to the water, to the ritual, not because someone orders you to, but because this is who you've become. The sanctuary doors stand open now, their golden handles warm from the sun. You pause at the threshold, bow, step inside. The space is dim, sacred, lit only by the last glow of dusk filtered through perfumed smoke. You take your place, kneel, begin the hymn. And as the first syllables leave your lips, you feel it, not just the echo of the words in the chamber, not just the weight of tradition behind you, but the sensation of your own skin against linen. Utterly smooth, no friction, no resistance, no part of you clinging to the outside world. This is what the gods ask for. And this is what you give. Every day. Every dusk. Without question. Without hair. Night has deepened again, pooling thick and quiet over the temple walls. The stars are out in force now, sharp, white, impossibly distant. The moon, no longer full, casts a thinner light over the courtyard stones, tracing silver outlines along the edges of statues and altar steps. You've just completed the final rite of the evening, the closing of the sanctuary doors. You and two others pulled the cedar panels shut with care, recited the protective incantations, sealed the bronze locks. The gods are at rest now, their inner sanctum dark and still. Your duties are technically finished. You could return to your sleeping niche, fold yourself into linen, and rest. But not tonight. Tonight, you've drawn the moon watch shift, which means one thing. A final, deeply quiet round of inspection and cleansing, done under stars, for those who keep sacred vigil through the dark. You return to the bathing chamber, not the main one, not the public pool used by mourning initiates and bustling acolytes, but the narrow, almost forgotten space at the northeast corner of the complex. The moon chamber, they call it. It's small, square, lit only by the moonlight that slips through a narrow skylight directly overhead. There's no torch here, no lamp, no fire. The gods of night, after all, prefer subtler illumination. You disrobe slowly, fold your robe and sash into the recess by the door, and step barefoot onto the smooth, cool stone. This is a different kind of cleansing. Not as rigorous as the midday scrub, not as visible as the morning shave, but more personal. More reflective. You dip your cloth into a basin of still water, scented faintly with crushed mint and something else, maybe myrrh left too long in the sun. You wipe your arms, your chest, your feet. Then you take your razor and, almost without thinking, make one careful pass across your cheek. Nothing comes off, but that's not the point. Because here, in the quiet of this moon-washed chamber, the act of shaving is not about presentation. It's about rhythm, intention, memory. Here's your mainstream fact for this hour. Temple priests performed nighttime duties as vigil keepers, and those serving during the moon watches were required to maintain the same level of bodily purity as if standing before Ra himself. Even though no offering was being made, no deity stirred visibly in the shrine, the ritual demanded presence, discipline, and yes, smoothness. Some texts describe these night watches as deeply sacred moments when a priest might receive visions, dreams, or hidden knowledge through quiet service. And they believed the cleaner the vessel, the clearer the dream. You finish wiping down your limbs, dry them slowly, then reapply a soft oil, lighter than the rich balms of earlier. This one is meant for sleep, for stillness. It smells of blue lotus and dusted cardamom, delicate as a lullaby. You massage it gently into your scalp, your chest, the curve of your shoulders. Not to impress, not to be seen, just to soothe. Here's your fringe tidbit. There are records, half poems, half recipes, of oils used not only to anoint the body, but to quiet the mind. Oil of no thought, one scribe called it, a blend of galangal, poppy, and fig bark. It wasn't narcotic, just calming, smoothing. Priests who served at night would sometimes anoint their brows with it before sleeping at dawn, believing it helped preserve the purity of their dreams. You think of that now, as you dip your fingers into your own jar and press the blend gently to your brow, where eyebrows would be, if you still had any. The skin there is soft, smooth, oddly tender, like the page of a book that's been erased again and again. And then, you sit. Not to chant, not to recite, just to sit, to listen. Because this is the secret no one really says aloud. The shaving, the bathing, the endless oiling, it's not just about the gods. It's about creating a space inside yourself. A blankness, a hush. When your body is still, when your limbs are smooth, when your scent is clean and your skin cooled by night air, there's a kind of stillness that settles in. Not emptiness, readiness, the kind that feels like it could hold something greater than you. You sit for a long time in the moon chamber. The stone cools beneath you. The stars drift slightly above. The wind whispers nothing in particular. And you realize, you don't know what time it is. And you don't care. You are nowhere. You are no one. You are just a shape in the dark, made from discipline and oil, offering your quiet body to a night that asks for nothing. Historians still argue whether the night vigils were truly mystical or just another layer of priestly labor, another demand on already overworked bodies. But here, in the hush of the moon chamber, you feel the answer. It doesn't matter what it started as. This is prayer now. Eventually, you rise, redress, step quietly back into the corridor, your footsteps feather soft on the stone. You leave no dust behind. You leave no scent. You leave no trace. And in your heart, as the last oil dries upon your skin, You carry a thought so soft it barely counts as language. The gods may never speak to you, but you've made yourself ready in case they do. The next morning begins not with the tolling of a bell or a burst of sound, but with a familiar feeling. The faint pull of sore muscles, the stiffness behind your knees from kneeling too long, the scent of oil still lingering faintly in the linen wrapped around your shoulders. The temple hasn't woken fully yet, but already the air is warming, the stone beneath your bare feet holding traces of yesterday's sun. You move quietly from your sleeping alcove, roll up your mat, fold your cloths, and begin your routine. But today, it's not the repetition that captures your thoughts. It's the strange sensation that you've passed a threshold. That somehow, in the endless round of shaving and bathing and serving, something has shifted. You're not just following the ritual anymore. You are the ritual. There's no separation now between who you are and what you do. You no longer flinch when the razor touches your skin. You don't second-guess the oil blend, or worry whether the cloth is too rough. Your body reacts on instinct. Bend here, reach there, smooth, rinse, press. It's muscle memory, yes, but more than that. It's identity. You don't just wear smoothness. You belong to it. And yet, you think back to how different things were in the beginning. How reluctant you were to part with your hair, not just the obvious parts, like your scalp or your brows, but the smaller ones too. The hair on your arms, the slight fuzz at the back of your neck, the whisper of softness across your forearms. You didn't realize how much they meant until they were gone. And then gone again, and again, until one day you stopped remembering what it felt like to have them. Until you looked at your reflection and thought, this is not strange. This is correct. Here's your mainstream historical insight for today. Many newly inducted priests reportedly underwent a period of intense purification before full ordination, involving not just shaving, but seclusion, repeated fasting, and hours of recitation. This was considered not just a training of the body, but of the self. To become a priest wasn't merely to take on duties. It was to erase the former you, to carve a vessel out of your former flesh and make it fit for the gods. Shaving was the visible part of that transformation, the daily removal of the old. And here's your curious tidbit. A fragmentary inscription from the Temple of Edfu suggests that some priests would mark personal milestones not in years, but in shaves. A line of hieroglyphs reads, "In the 6,000th shave, I served beside the high priest of Sekhmet." Which tells you a few things. First, that someone was counting. And second, that these rituals, so easily dismissed as surface, ran deep. So deep, they became time itself. You stand before the mirror now. Not bronze, not polished copper, but a simple basin of water, the surface still and bright. You look down into it and see the face you've shaped for years. Bare scalp, clean skin, browless brow, lips pressed in calm. A face that no longer carries the features you once recognized in your youth. You don't remember what you looked like with hair. Not exactly. You might not even recognize that face now. And that's the quiet truth that lives at the heart of this tradition. You are not meant to stay yourself. The longer you serve, the more of you is worn away, not in pain, not in grief, but in refinement. Like sandstone smoothed by wind, like papyrus scraped blank, until only the essentials remain. You've known priests who embraced this with serenity, others who resisted it quietly, laughing a little too loudly at jokes about wigs and eyebrows, rubbing their arms too hard with cloths, secretly applying oil not for devotion but in hope of slipping free. And you've known one or two who left, who grew their hair back, who walked away from the silence and never returned. Historians still puzzle over this transformation. Was it voluntary? Was it enforced? Was it beautiful? Was it a slow kind of erasure? The records say little, the gods say less. But you, standing here with your razor in hand, feel neither resistance nor rapture. Only this: readiness. You apply the natron paste one more time, not because you expect hair to appear, but because this act anchors you. Then the razor, then the rinse, the cloth, the oil, all done without thought, as natural now as breath. And when it's finished, you dress. The robe feels lighter than it did when you were new. Not because it's thinner, but because you carry less. You walk out into the growing sunlight, and the guards nod as you pass. Not out of obligation, but recognition. They know what you are. You're not just a man who shaves. You are one of the ones who never stopped. By midday, the heat has settled into the temple stones like an old god curling down for a nap, heavy, unmoving, absolute. The courtyard shimmers faintly under its weight. Sand grits between paving cracks. The fig trees droop. Even the statues seem to sweat, their polished surfaces catching the sunlight and throwing it back in soft, blinding gleams. You've just finished your second bath of the day. The water was warm, the natron scratchy, the oil nearly gone before it even reached your skin. But still, you followed the steps. Because the third rite begins soon. And despite the fact that you've already shaved once this morning, you'll check again. Not because you expect change, but because you know what's expected. You move through the colonnade slowly, trailing your fingers along the sandstone grooves. The ridges are smooth, worn down from centuries of the same motions. Processions, prayers, palms pressed during whispered vows. It feels like continuity itself, this slow glide through shadow and sun, your bare feet silent on the warm floor. You pass a small group of acolytes gathered under an awning, laughing softly, dabbing sweat from their brows. One of them, a boy not yet 15, sees you and straightens. You catch him glance at your arms, your chin, your scalp, assessing. He will do this 1,000 times before he's ready. And here's your historical constant for today. Apprentice priests trained not just in ritual speech and scripture, but in personal grooming. It was part of their curriculum. Records from temple schools include entire scrolls devoted to cleansing, when to shave, how to mix pastes, what to do if a blade dulls during a rite. Failure to master the grooming rites was not just a disciplinary issue. It was considered a spiritual one. An unshaven priest in training was deemed not only unready, but untrustworthy. You pass him with a small nod. He bows too quickly, awkward in his movements. You remember that stage, when every step felt exposed, when a missed corner of hair behind the ear could cost you a week of duties. You don't envy him, but you do admire the hunger in his eyes. He still wants to be worthy. You reach the quiet shade of the antechamber and begin your final inspection. A copper bowl of water waits, lined with tiny petals of dried myrrh. You crouch low, lean into your reflection, and study the curve of your jaw, the plane of your scalp, the ridges where your brows once lived. Still smooth, still whole, but you take the blade anyway. Just a pass or two. Chin to jaw, jaw to neck, an old rhythm, familiar as heartbeat. And it's in this moment, this pause between the gesture and the completion, that you realize something. You haven't thought about shaving in days. Not really, not as a task, not even as a ritual. It's just part of you now. In the way a bird doesn't think about flying, or the sun doesn't consider rising. You are no longer shaving to become a priest. You are shaving because you are one. It hasn't made you holy. It hasn't made you divine. But it has made you still. That stillness is hard-earned. It didn't come from the first 100 shaves, or even the first 1,000. It came somewhere deep into the repetition, where the body and the mind aligned, where the oil and the blade and the breath found each other and formed a kind of silent chord. And here's your curious observation for the day. Some late-period temples described priestly grooming not as preparation, but as tuning. Like an instrument, the body had to be brought into harmony, each scrape of the blade a correction, each rinse a realignment. Smoothness wasn't about presentation, it was about resonance. Only the finely tuned could carry the frequency of prayer without distortion. You rise, pat dry your skin, and dress again. Another robe, another sash. The linen is thinner now, sweat-prone. You tie it tightly, not from vanity, but because precision has become your language. Every fold is a sentence. Every step, punctuation. Outside, the bell rings once. Lo, it's time. You walk through the central hall toward the third shrine. Today, you will not be leading the rite. You will be standing beside the officiant, holding the water vessel, ready to pour at the right moment. It's not a glamorous role, but it is sacred, and only those with the proper signs of purity may do it. As you pass beneath the great lintel, light spills down across your face. It catches the curve of your scalp, the sheen of oil behind your ear, the absolute absence of stray shadows along your neck. And for a moment, you are aware of your body not as flesh, but as surface, a space for light to move across. You feel empty and full at once, ordinary and other, not invisible, but clear. Historians still argue whether this clarity, the state achieved through shaving, bathing, anointing, was symbolic or somatic. Whether the rituals were for the gods or the men who performed them. Whether cleanliness was a gateway to transcendence or simply a way to enforce control. You suspect the answer is yes. All of it. Because right now, as you stand beside the altar, water jar cradled in your arms, watching the smoke rise in ribbons toward a carved ceiling filled with falcons and stars, you feel no doubt. No question, no ache, just the cool of the stone beneath your feet, the weight of oil on your skin, and the silence of a man who has given up all things unnecessary. Even hair. Evening has folded itself fully over the temple now, laying soft shadows into every crevice of stone, tucking stillness between columns and along thresholds where priests stand motionless in their final watch. You walk alone through the incense hall, the scent of burnt cedar still hanging in the air like a second robe, wrapping itself around your limbs, your breath, your thoughts. You've completed your final duties. The altars have been cleared, the offerings removed, the sacred basin drained and wiped. The sanctuary is locked until dawn. No more chants tonight, no more shavings. The blade rests in its linen wrapping. The oil jar has been sealed. You have earned your rest. And yet, instead of retreating to your sleeping mat, you find yourself wandering through the colonnades one last time, slowly, like someone visiting a dream. Your bare feet brush gently over worn paths. Your hand trails the stone as if it could read your memories back to you. The moonlight spills quietly through the archways, not demanding attention, just present, like you, after all these years of service, are present. You pause at the base of the great falcon statue near the courtyard's edge, one of the oldest relics in the temple, so worn that its beak has softened into a smooth curve, its wings dulled by centuries of wind and sun. You remember when your own face felt that way, sharp, expressive, furrowed with the minor lines of a man who still thought of himself as a body. Now it feels like this statue, toned down by years of ritual, scraped clean by time. You lift your hand and touch your brow, feeling the familiar absence, that smooth stretch where your eyebrows once lived, and you marvel again at how complete the transformation has become. This isn't a costume you wear. This isn't a habit. This is your shape now. The you that once fidgeted in front of the mirror, unsure whether to shave again, unsure what all this meant. That version has long since been folded into the fabric of your role. All the questions have softened. The blade has answered them in silence. Here's your final mainstream insight. For ancient Egyptian priests, depilation was not a temporary cleansing, but a permanent commitment. You didn't shave for one day or one season. You shaved for a lifetime. Not out of vanity, but out of necessity. It was a lifetime of daily discipline, of spiritual hygiene that shaped not only your body but your mind, your mood, your very posture in the world. You became a vessel not by birthright or by study alone, but by subtraction, removing everything the gods had not asked for, peeling away layers of self until what remained was both less and more than what you had been. And here's your final quirky, lesser-known detail. A letter found in a worker's village, tucked into the folds of an old account scroll, speaks of a retired priest who chose never to grow his hair again. Not because he had to, but because, as he wrote, "My soul has grown used to silence. Hair would make a noise I no longer understand." It was a poetic way of saying what you now feel in your bones, that this path, once begun, carves its own logic into you. There is no going back, but more importantly, there is no longer a need to. You continue your quiet walk toward the outer courtyard, where the wind is rising slightly, brushing over the tops of the date palms, stirring the small bells that hang above the temple's northern gate. You pause there for a moment, head tilted, listening to their tiny music, and you feel something strange, less like pride, more like completeness. You haven't become perfect, you haven't become holy, but you've become ready. Each day, each bath, each gentle scrape of bronze across your skin has stripped you not only of hair but of resistance. The gods do not require you to be without flaw. They require you to be without noise. And now, finally, you are quiet. You kneel briefly in the courtyard, forehead resting against the warm stone. No one sees you. No one needs to. This moment is not part of the schedule. It is not rehearsed or recorded. But it feels more real than anything you've done today. You speak no words. You offer no chant. You simply breathe. Smooth limbs folded beneath a smooth brow, head bowed to a sky you can never quite name. The wind touches your back, then moves on. You rise slowly. The last light is gone now. The stars are sharp again. You return to your cell, undress, lie down on the reed mat, and draw the linen sheet up to your chest. Your body, still lightly scented, still warm from the last touch of sun, eases into the cloth like water into stone. You close your eyes. You do not think of the blade. You do not think of the oil. You simply rest, knowing that the razor waits for you in the morning, like a familiar prayer. And now, as your body settles into stillness and your breath begins to lengthen, let yourself drift, slowly, gently, into that inner silence you've cultivated with such care. The rituals are finished. The blade is resting. The temple has folded itself into darkness, and there is nothing left for you to do but surrender to the quiet. The stone beneath your mat holds the warmth of the day, and the linen over your skin cools with the whisper of night. Your scalp, freshly oiled, no longer itches. Your limbs, clean and bare, no longer ache. You have given everything you were asked to give, again and again, and now, you are allowed to simply be. In this moment, there is no past, no future, no shape to worry about. There is only the soft breath passing through your nose, the slow rise and fall of your chest, and the weightless calm that follows a life of gentle discipline. The moonlight filters faintly through the reed screen, catching on the edge of your foot before sliding quietly away. The gods are silent. The wind is low. The last torch has guttered into memory. You are not thinking of hair. You are not thinking of duty. You are not thinking at all. Only feeling, only floating, only listening to the hush within yourself, as if your own skin has become the inside of a temple, smooth, still, and sacred. So rest now, priest. The gods have been honored. The rites have been kept. The blade has done its work. You are as clean as the sky, as quiet as the sand, as finished as the hymn. Let your thoughts loosen. Let your hands fall open. Let your dreams arrive without noise. You are ready. Sleep.